Hey, it feels different, right?
Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Fantasy Sports. Today I'm going to be covering the Week 7 NFL slate. Obviously there was a lot of good games this weekend, some more significant injuries, and some stories that I really want to get into. But I think we should start with Thursday Night Football like I usually do. There are some games here that I obviously am not going to talk too much about, just because whether or not it was like the Ravens game or whether or not it was the Buccaneers game, where it just either wasn't high scoring or it was a blowout. I feel like, I will talk on them, I'll touch on them of course. But, there's more important games that happened this week. But yeah, let's start off with Thursday Night Football. That was a really good game. Obviously, the Jaguars wound up taking the win in overtime. There was a drop touchdown in the back of the end zone by the Saints tight end. But with that being said, I think my biggest takeaways from the game were clearly Derek Carr and Trevor Lawrence. I think the two quarterbacks. Travis Etienne Jr. looks very strong right now as a running back and as a catcher. But I think the Jaguars' offense does lack in the passing department, as well as the Saints. Derek Carr very much airmails a lot of his deep balls, and if it's not that, he just struggles in short yardage, like to medium yardage. I don't know if it's accuracy as much as it is connections. But with that being said, Trevor Lawrence is also struggling, I feel like as well. But with the way that Travis Etienne and the offense and defense have been playing, the way he's been playing and the way defense is playing, it hasn't put him in a position yet to have to win a game. And I think eventually when it comes down to him having to win a game, it might not be that pretty. So I'm worried about that for the future of the Jaguars and for the future of the Saints after starting off 2-0. It just hasn't seemed that good. Seems like Derek Carr might be still playing injured if he's playing injured. But he's definitely not looked like the same Derek Carr we saw in the first 2 weeks. And apart from that, the Saints defense does still look strong. But quarterback play on both teams, I think, is a big aspect for both of those teams. And for the Falcons-Buccaneers game, this was kind of a messy game. Obviously low scoring, a lot of field goals. But I think one of my biggest takeaways, like I had said in the last game, was quarterback play. Both of them looked weak. Baker Mayfield only had really one good deep ball connection on a route that he didn't really overthrow per se, but the only way Mike Evans was getting there is if A.J. Terrell tripped, which is what he did. He just created separation through that. And that was really honestly the only score they had. It was the only score they had. The Falcons looked good. Desmond Ridder wound up fumbling the ball on the 1 yard line. Drake London again in the end zone. He wound up being down on the 1 yard line. But just weak offensive showings for both of those teams. And I think in part it's on the offense, but on part it's on the coaches as well. I just feel like at the end of the day, there always are low scoring games that wound up being taken too far just because of the defense and the way they're playing and the way things go. But definitely quarterback play for that as well. The Raiders-Bears game, this was a sloppy game. The Bears came out. Deontay Foreman had 3 touchdowns. That was really impressive. And the quarterback that wound up filling in for Justin Fields, rookie, with the dad that has this world arm wrestler, he played pretty solid. He completed a majority of his passes. He did not turn over the ball, and he had I think he had over 250 yards passing. So it was really impressive to see. Obviously, the Raiders without Jimmy G. They have Brian Hoyer, and Devontae Adams must be frustrated. Obviously, they said this week that they weren't trading him before the deadline, clearly, which means they are not trading him in general. And for a team that's playing abysmal right now at this point, with a team that you would expect to be solid, it's looking ugly for the for the rest of their season, especially with even when Jimmy G's in, they don't look competent on defense or offense, and not getting your number 1 wide receiver the ball after coming off of a 1,500-yard, 10-plus touchdown season. 8-touchdown season. It's rough. It's definitely rough, and I can imagine that Devontae's frustrated. But the Bears did a lot of good on defense as well as offense, and I want to see Justin Fields get back, so I'm excited for that. But overall, just a pretty dominant game by the Bears. The best game this week for me, obviously, and it's the next game I'm talking about, was the Browns and the Colts game. This was a game that Myles Garrett dominated, and the Browns are called the best defense in the league right now, top 2. But giving up 38 points to the Colts, especially in a game where it seemed as though they had a lot of control of the ball and still winning, is extremely impressive. Myles Garrett, I'm pretty sure, had 2 forced fumbles, a blocked kick, and a tackle for loss in the end zone, if I recall. But yeah, it was a really good showing. Gardner Minshew had 4 turnovers and he had 4 in the game before that. So when your first round quarterback leaves and your backup can put up 38, usually you expect to kind of win that game. But clearly not enough, and clearly too many turnovers by Gardner Minshew, and I know that that's going to be a focus for him. I think he had 3 fumbles and an interception, and then the week before that he had 3 interceptions and a fumble. So yeah, just definitely interesting on that side of the aspect. But the Browns, Deshaun Watson getting injured, PJ filling in. He did what he needed to do, but they need Deshaun back. That offense looked ugly with no with the running back going out and Deshaun going out. Definitely an ugly game. But with that being said, them combined putting up 77 points is pretty insane for a game that you did not expect to be like that. But definitely game of the week in terms of scoring and how it came down to the end of the game with the Browns winning. And then another very important game, which was the Giants win against the Commanders. I know a lot of Giants fans are super happy about that. I was told very specifically to hone in on how important this win was. Obviously, with Daniel Jones out, Tyrod Taylor's made the offense look a little more complete. The Commanders did not look that well on offense, and I think part of that has to do with how good the Giants defense can be when they're playing good, but also Sam Howell and Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson had a couple drops that earlier in the year it was the problem of not getting the ball, but when he got the ball, he would sometimes fiddle with it. Sometimes he would drop it, and I think a big part of that is because he's not catching enough. And I know that sounds stupid when you're in practice and stuff, but in-game is so different, and I think Jahan Dotson hasn't gotten a lot of in-game touches, which is a big problem for someone who's a sophomore. There's, obviously the sophomore slump. But with that being said, he looks very, very much just weak out there. On the last play of the game when Sam Howell threw it to him, he threw it just like an inch behind him, not too far. But it was a very catchable ball, and, he obviously clearly dropped it. But a very good game by the Giants on the offense. Darren Waller played good, Tyrod played good, Saquon played good, and Kayvon Thibodeau played good. So a much needed win for them, obviously being 1-5, not 2-5. And the Commanders and the Giants, both are weaker teams, but it was a big win for them in a divisional game. So that's exciting to see for sure. But with that also being said, I do think it's a concern that the offense looks better with Tyrod Taylor than it did with Daniel Jones, although they did not have Saquon Barkley and, so on and so forth with the defense. Like I said, the Lions-Ravens game, not much to talk about. Lamar came out, he threw 3 touchdowns, had a rushing touchdown. Jared Goff really couldn't get anything going. But Jahmyr Gibbs finally had a big game, which is extremely exciting for any fantasy user, but just for people in general. I know everyone wanted to see what he could do. And clearly on that pass, screen-like pass, kind of option throw or toss, when he took it to the house, there was a big hole, but the fast, the speed that he had was extremely impressive. And I know that's what people are excited to see. So with that being said, I think, it's something that you should watch for the rest of the season, just how they wind up using him after having a 28-point game. Could it be a one-off? Yeah, it could be. But pretty dominant game by the Ravens, and they're also looking extremely strong after coming through an insane loss, which I have no idea how they lost to the Steelers, although I love them. I just have no game. Another really good game, the Bills and the Patriots. The Patriots wound up winning this with 13 seconds to go when they threw a touchdown to Mike Gesicki. Mac Jones threw a touchdown to Mike Gesicki. It's really concerning for me because the Bills are such a different team. I feel like Josh Allen has these highs and lows that are unlike any other quarterback in the league right now. Sometimes he just happens to just not be able to command an offense and be able to, put drives together. But then there's other times when you see him and he, dominates with Stephon Diggs. And on a day where Stephon Diggs had a pretty weak game, albeit, a 40-yard touchdown that was, shouldn't have been a touchdown, I guess you could argue. It's weird. It's just the Bills take losses like this, and it confuses me because they put up, 48 points against the Dolphins. And although the Dolphins lost 31-17, it's like they're a really good team with a really good defense and offense. So it's confusing, and I don't know what to take away from it other than the fact that Mac Jones, and this was the first time the Patriots had scored 28 or more points since week 6 of last season or the season prior to that. It'd been a while. But yeah, strong game by the Patriots, I guess. I think it was a little more or less a weak game by the Bills than a strong game by the Patriots. But yeah, definitely something to keep out for the rest of the season. For the Bills, if they're going to want to be championship contenders, how they play in these games that seem to not matter, but then, they lose them, and it's concerning when, they also had a game where they struggled against the Giants. So definitely something to watch out for. Game that I'm really excited to talk about, which is the Steelers-Rams win. We looked really good on Sunday. Najee looked really good. Pickens looked really good. We really needed Johnson back, and Pickett was not making any mistakes. Made some really good downfield throws, made some really good short yardage throws, and he just looked really fluid out there. With that being said, I know Matt Canada has been a problem, but every now and then he seems to put these drives together, and I think he's getting more and more comfortable and, with Kenny Pickett, with the offense. And I know that sounds stupid, but I think he's learning a little bit more how to use Kenny and how to use Najee and Jaylen Warren all together on a team that seems to be obviously one of the weaker teams on offense. They're getting really strong on offense, and, they have a really good defense, so that's good. Rams, we kind of game plan for Cooper Kupp. Puka Nacua killed us. But Matt Stafford looked bad in this game. Again, you're playing against the Steelers defense. I know it's a really good defense, but he looked weak. At the end of the day, there's games that you can't really chalk up to anything other than just another team came out and won it. And I think that was one of these games where we won by 1 touchdown. It was a good game. It was a close game. We were down 17-10 at one point. We wound up stringing together 2 good drives at the end of the game to win us the game. But my biggest exciting thing for it is just the thing I'm most excited about coming out of this game is Kenny Pickett and Najee Harris. Najee looked strong. He was running strong. Obviously, he had one big loss, but that was just too many people on the right side of the ball. And he shot it probably, obviously, they didn't want him to run downtown. They wanted him to run to the sideline. Or down the middle, down the side. They wanted to run down the sideline. But yeah, him and Pickett looked very solid, and it was a really good offensive game, which is, something the Steelers don't often do. So it was extremely exciting. For the Chargers-Chiefs game, it was odd. This was an odd game that I was watching at night because the Chiefs came out and kind of not dominated, but they also did dominate. But the Chargers are such a confusing team. They're one of the teams that always seems to lose in 1-score games, and obviously you got away from them, wound up being a 2-score game. But it was a 1-score game for a majority of it, so it is concerning to see on Justin Herbert's part another weak game, especially, although he's playing without Mike Williams, you do have Joshua Palmer, you have Johnson, you have Keenan, you have Eckler, and then you have this defense that is just, it seems like they have players, but it seems like none of them make any plays, and that's just going back to last week when they lost against the Cowboys. It seemed like none of them just made, like Derwin James seems to disappear all of a sudden, and although he's a top safety, it's just like, what does he really bring to that defense other than intensity? And with that being said, that's something that you need, but it just seems like he hasn't been making plays recently, which I guess can be the same for any big time player on defense. Minkah hasn't been making a lot of plays either. But solid win for the Chiefs. It seems like Justin Ross had a big game. Obviously, he had a breakout game. Not Justin Ross. Rice had a breakout game. Kelsey had a huge game. Mahomes had a really, really good game. The defense looked really solid, both on blitzes and in coverage. But yeah, definitely worried about the Chargers going forward on offense and what they're going to do on defense concerning whether or not they can, make these plays and cover big-time wide receivers because they haven't been able to do that so far with CD and Travis Kelce back-to-back weeks, doing very good against them. Dolphins-Eagles, really interesting game. Was very close for a majority of it. Obviously, Tyreek dropped a touchdown. It was kind of killer because I lost him 1 point by 1 point in fantasy this week. But with that being said, it was a really impressive game. The Eagles came out and kind of dominated. They seemed to be really strong. They didn't make a lot of mistakes. Jalen Hurts made some really big throws. A.J. Brown has had his 5th 125-yard game in a row, which is, NFL record. But Devontae Smith has been kind of disappearing. And I think that's partly because DeAndre Swift and A.J. Brown have been dominating the touches and dominating when they get these touches. So it's just kind of riding the hot hand, I guess. But at the same time, it does concern you for fantasy purposes. Drafting him as wide receiver 2, he has 2 big weeks. And then after A.J. Brown complains, he seems to not be getting touches. But they're winning, so you can't really complain. For the Dolphins, Tua, only 1 turnover, and it was a bad, lofted pick in the back end of the game. So not really concerning, but it is concerning when they play these teams like the Eagles and the Bills and they lose, and then they go up against cakewalk teams and put up like 48. It's concerning, just because it seems like maybe Tua, might be a step back from missing all of last year. But he still shows up, in big time plays and certain things. But the Eagles came out, strong defense, strong offensive game, very much like what I saw out of both of them. If there's only thing I'm going to take away from the Dolphins, it's that their defense doesn't seem to step up enough, although they had a pick 6. It just doesn't seem as though they can get out of a drive without a touchdown sometimes. Like they can't hold them, bend not break. So that's definitely something I guess would be a big concern for the Dolphins heading forward. And then for the 49ers and Vikings, I think this was a game that I was most excited for. I really wanted to see the Vikings come out and kind of shock them. And I wasn't calling anything. I wasn't excited. I wasn't saying that they were going to win, but they wound up doing that. And Jordan Addison had a breakout game. So that was definitely one of the biggest exciting factors of that game. Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson with Kirk Cousins throwing for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Definitely something you love to see. For the 49ers, I guess the biggest takeaway is obviously they had no Trent Williams. They had no Deebo Samuel. Brock Purdy threw 2 picks. Were they bad picks? One of them was. The game-ending one wasn't as bad, but the one floated down the middle was concerning just because there was... Sometimes it seems as though he sits behind the offensive line waiting for him to take his time and throw the ball and get his ball out, get the ball out on time. But it seems like when he doesn't have that, it just doesn't seem... Like, he can make plays by all means, but it just... Sometimes he tries to... Like any quarterback predicts a throw, you're going to expect him to, time it up. And just when he doesn't seem to be on the same page as wide receivers, gets a little messy. But yeah, definitely a very interesting game, big game for the Vikings, being 3-4 now after starting the season pretty soft. Definitely excited to see that. Definitely, excited to see the game. They were 0-3 in one-score games, and with that being said, they've gotten a little bit better since then. With Justin Jefferson having 2 straight wins, that's definitely something you'd like to see. But yeah, definitely a very exciting week of football, and I know I'm excited very much for this next week and this game on Thursday with the Buccaneers and Bills after they took a big loss. So yeah, I always appreciate you guys watching, and tune in next week.